What did he progress to as a boxer?
Well, he never got off of learning how to punch, so not very far. He was a overweight, large man when he came to us, and a very, very pleasant, very nice man, but physically soft. He was predominantly fat, not a lot of muscle.
Not a flattering portrait of George Zimmerman, but one that could be important for the defence. Back me now, Judge Alex Berra, host of television's Judge Alex and a former Florida Circuit Court judge, also defence attorney Janie Weintraub, and Alan Dershowitz. Welcome to my new experts. Alan Dershowitz, let me go to you. You're joining us via Skype. I suppose in the end it comes down to this. Has the prosecution proved its case, yes or no?
No, they've created a terrible problem for themselves by overcharging second-degree murder. If they had instead charged what would have been appropriate in this case, at most manslaughter, they would have had a reasonable chance of prevailing. But by overcharging, and now I suspect they're going to seek a compromise verdict, they're going to probably ask the judge to charge on both second-degree murder and manslaughter in the hope that the jury will come to a compromise verdict. That will be objected to, and it will create incredible complications. That's what happens when you overcharge for political reasons, and that's what happened here.
Jane Weintraub, I mean, here's my sense of what a lot of people think, which is that in the end, an unarmed 17-year-old teenager has been killed. And the idea that the person that did that is able just to walk free, an innocent man guilty of nothing, doesn't seem right to them.
Well, and I hear you, Piers, and as a mother, of course, I understand. But as a lawyer, analyzing the evidence that's before us and understanding the legal instruction that the judge will give the jury, that a reasonable doubt can be proven by a conflict in the evidence, a lack of evidence, it goes to show that there's nothing but reasonable doubt in this case. I mean, the mother of Trayvon Martin and the mother of George Zimmerman, both of them were put up by their respective lawyers. Neither one of those women were lying. I don't believe any of these people were lying. I believe that they were testifying about what they really wanted to hear and what they did hear. But all that amounts to is reasonable doubt.
I mean, Judge Alex, incontrovertibly, there is reasonable doubt out here. Nobody knows, as you said, about the crucial moments that led up to the altercation, which under Florida law is what really matters. What happened before in the van, on the phone, etc., is all really irrelevant.
You're right. When it comes down to self-defense, what matters is what happens at the time of the confrontation. And by the way, this is by no means unique. Very often you have a crime where the victim is dead and you're stuck with one side of the story. Sometimes the police can make something out of that. Sometimes they cannot. Often they cannot. So this is not a unique case by any means at all. And yes, it is tragic when you have a 17-year-old who is killed, and it appears unjustifiably so. But imagine the scenario where you wake up and you hear a noise, you grab your gun, you go to the living room, and you see somebody climbing through your window, and you shoot him. Turns out your daughter had called her boyfriend and said, come over, I left the window open, and you just killed a 17-year-old who was doing nothing wrong. Clearly, nobody would send you to prison for that. Now, this is a vastly different scenario, but it's the same test. You look to see what the perception was of the person at the time they used deadly force. If the jury agrees that he was acting reasonably in his mind when he thought he was going to suffer serious bodily injury and it was reasonable for him to use deadly force, they will find him not guilty because of self-defense. If they disagree, he will be convicted of manslaughter.
Alan Dershowitz, I mean, this case, I think, is so fascinating to people and being so widely watched around the world, in fact. And I was talking to people in Britain, they're gripped by it, because it cuts to everything, doesn't it? It cuts to guns, to race, to society, to self-defense. So many pillars of American life colliding in one courtroom right now. What will the repercussions be of this, whatever happens with the verdict?
Well, Oliver Wendell Holmes once said that hard cases make bad law. And it's not the job of a jury to solve America's social problems, to solve America's gun problem or race problem. It's to decide whether there is a reasonable doubt, the burden's on the government, as to whether or not he acted in self-defense. And the more the jury is invited to think broadly about these social issues, the greater the problem will be with their verdict. It's our job as commentators, as others, to deal with the broad social concerns about this case. And however the case is resolved by the jury, there'll be dissatisfaction because, as you put it so well, there is a 17-year-old child who's dead, but only one person is on trial, and that's the defendant. And he's the only one who has rights in this case. And the public often doesn't understand that. So whatever the verdict will be here, there'll be some dissatisfaction, and it's part of our job. And I think, Piers, you're doing a very good job educating the public about the complexity of a case like this.
Right. I mean, it is really not about human emotion or the reactions that we all might have as parents or anything else. You know, I find it as if I've got 3 teenage sons, and if this happened to one of them, I would want justice. But at the same time...
Is it justice or is it retribution?
Well, that's the point, isn't it? And I do not believe that George Zimmerman set out to murder Trayvon Martin. So you're looking at a worst-case scenario of some sort of manslaughter case. But I just find the idea, and I know this said this to you before, but I think it comes to the crux of what people think, of him just walking away with nothing.
Well, I know this is a terrible thing to say, but when he was asked, what are you doing or why are you following me? Conversely, if Trayvon had just answered his question and said, I'm going to my dad's, he lives over there.
Why didn't George Zimmerman say, I'm a neighbourhood watch official, I'm off duty at the moment, but I've got to ask you, what are you doing? Why didn't he just announce who he was?
He should have. But he wasn't under the law. He wasn't compelled to.
Right, Judge Alex, I mean, it may not be under the law, but surely this has to be taken into consideration. George Zimmerman ignored advice, got out of his vehicle, said, you know, effing punks, a-holes, getting away with it, marched away. We don't know what happened next. But at the end, the idea there is no punishment for the fact that that sequence of actions leads to him shooting an unarmed teenager dead seems to me pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, I think that sticks in everybody's throat. Those of us who work in the judicial system know that sometimes the outcome in a trial is not fair in the sense of what America thinks is fair, but it's fair in the sense of what the legal system thinks is fair. Because to send somebody to prison for a crime, you have to prove the elements of that crime. And the elements of a crime are like the ingredients of a cake. And if you leave one of those out, you don't have the crime that you charged them with. It is a by-the-book process, and there's no other way to do it. If you do it by emotion, then we are going to go back to the days of pitchforks and torches, going up to the jailhouse and drawing your own retribution.
I want a quick one-word answer out of all of you, if I may. Guilty or not guilty of second-degree murder? Alan?
Not guilty of second-degree murder. Possibly they may find him guilty of manslaughter, but that will be appealed, and perhaps successfully.
Judge Alex?
I think not guilty of second-degree murder, and I think that if they reject self-defense, he gets a manslaughter, and I think that gets upheld on appeal. If they go with self-defense, then it's a total acquittal.
Jane?
Not guilty.
Fascinating stuff. Alex Ferrer, Jane Weintraub, Alan Dershowitz, thank you all very much indeed. Come back soon. It'll only build and build excitement, I think, for this verdict, which nobody is really sure what's going to happen, and that's why people are gripped by it. But let's come back soon. Coming next.